Welcome to the Tanya Acker Show. Jake Tapper is the lead Washington anchor for CNN. He is host of The Lead with Jake Tapper, and he's also co-host of State of the Union with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. Jake also has a new book coming out on October 7th. The book is Race Against Terror, and it's a nonfiction thriller that tells the story of two federal prosecutors who are in a literal race against time to collect evidence against an al-Qaeda operative before said operative is set free. Here I am with Jake Tapper. We talk about the new book and a bunch of other things. So thank you for being here, and please don't forget to subscribe. Welcome to the podcast, Jake Tapper. It's a thrill for me to have you here.
It's so great to be here, and I know we have a common friend, Rod Lurie, the esteemed director. So you come highly recommended from him as well.
Well, thank you. Rod's going to be on the show talking about West Point et al. And I want to get into that with you a little bit too. So your new book, Race Against Terror, comes out next month, October 7th. And this is what I find interesting. So the book begins in June 2011, about a decade after 9/11. And it starts with a man who identifies himself as an al-Qaeda operative surrendering to Italian authorities. Now, the surrender of a terrorist is normally the climax of a book, not the beginning. Tell us a little bit about this story.
So it's kind of, you hit the nail on the head there. It's kind of a reverse whodunit. We know who did it. And then the question is, how do we prove it? How do the main characters in the book prove it? So what happens is it's the Arab Spring, June 2011. And Berlusconi, the prime minister of Italy, has commandeered all these cruise ships because there's this refugee crisis because of the Arab Spring. And there are all these Tunisians and Libyans who have fled Africa, and they're in the southern Italian islands. And so there's a huge refugee crisis. So Berlusconi's, taking them all to the mainland, to refugee camps in the mainland of Italy. And on that ship, a 5'6" man from Niger approaches one of these Italian soldiers, an Italian Green Beret, and asks for water. The guy gives him some water and notices he has a bullet hole scar. He says, "Where'd you get that?" He goes, I got it fighting Americans in Afghanistan. I'm in al-Qaeda." And from there, it becomes this race to prove that he is who he says he is, because the Italians only have the ability to hold him for a month or two. They call the Americans after they interrogate him on the ship, and they say, we have this guy here. They call the FBI. We have this guy here. He says his name is Spin Ghoul. He's an al-Qaeda operative. Have you ever even heard of him? And the Americans have, because he was a player in al-Qaeda at the turn of the century, 2001, 2002. And so from there, it is a race to prove a case against Spin Ghoul, whose life ambition, he makes no bones about it, is to kill as many Americans as possible. He looks at the 1998 embassy bombings as like an achievement he wants to replicate. And so the Americans, the FBI, the U.S. attorney's offices, and others have to prove this case before the Italians get fed up and just release him into a refugee camp where he'll easily escape and then kill as many Americans as possible.
So why would they release him in the light of his confession? Why not at the point where he says, "I'm Spin Ghoul, I've killed Americans, I want to kill more Americans"? Why not just turn him over to the Americans?
Well, they want to turn him over to the Americans, but it's 2011. If it had been 2007, the Bush administration would have just taken him and sent him to Gitmo, and that would have been the end of it. But President Obama was in charge, and he had basically no new people to Gitmo. And President Obama wanted to show that these terrorists could be tried in a U.S. criminal court. And this was a huge, fierce debate at the time. I'm sure you remember. Can you trust them? I mean, there was almost this idea that if you brought somebody like Spin Ghoul to New York, people were afraid of him, like almost as if he had super villain powers. And then, of course, what happens if he doesn't get convicted? He's a free man in the United States. So there was a real political risk for not just President Obama, but all these assistant U.S. attorneys and others who wanted to bring him to the United States, but they had to have an airtight case against him so that they were confident that he would never see the light of day again. The Italians had no reason to hold him beyond a kerfuffle on the ship after they tried to sedate him, and after which, they tried to sedate him, and he had done nothing to Italy. And in fact, his claims were not proved. He was saying, I killed Americans in Afghanistan, but he couldn't provide any dates. He couldn't provide any specifics to make it so it was anything other than potentially the ravings of a madman. And that was the other thing. The Americans couldn't just bring him to the United States because any decent defense attorney would be able to say, you have absolutely no proof. This is just some crazy guy who showed up on a ship after being in a Libyan prison for 5 years. For all we know, we made it up. He made it up. And, and a judge might say, yeah, there's no evidence and, case closed. And all of a sudden this mass murderer, and the Americans were confident that he was who he says he was. This mass murderer is on the streets of Brooklyn.
And given the fact that, as you point out, he wasn't really providing any specifics. It wasn't a true confession. It could have just been somebody with a terrorist God complex who wanted to make himself seem something that he wasn't. So they did have to put a case together. The protagonists in your book are two federal prosecutors. So just without giving things away, I haven't finished it yet, but I do have an advanced copy. Rod will be jealous because he did say, I can't wait to read the next book. Talk a little bit about the drama of that evidence collection, because these guys, if they want to prove a case against this guy, because again, another good point you make, and we lawyers know this, is that a second-year law student could have gotten him off if all the government has is some confession in Italy with no facts or details or circumstances to prove that he was who he said he was. So tell us a little bit about, give us a tease about some of the drama that these two prosecutors endure as they are trying to put this case together.
Well, one of the things that I love about this story, not about my book, but about just the actual story that happened, the heroes of this book, it's almost as if Hollywood came up with it because it's just this great American mosaic. You have two assistant U.S. attorneys. One is Dave Bittkower, this wiry, intense Jewish kid from New York who went to Yale. And then the other one is Shreve Ariel, who's kind of this hail fellow, well-met, gregarious, waspy guy from Virginia. You have Roshana Muhammad, a Muslim FBI employee who's with the Joint Terrorism Task Force from Baltimore. You have this other guy, Bert Lacroix, who's from the Caribbean, an American by choice. There's just this great diverse American mosaic of people and characters, and they are all completely devoted to justice and just trying to bring justice to this case. So, as you know, Spin Ghoul has a story, but he doesn't have a lot of details and he doesn't have a lot of proof. In fact, he has no proof. He doesn't even know the date of this ambush. He says he killed Americans, maybe 4 or 5 in an ambush in Afghanistan, but he doesn't even know the date because he doesn't, this is 2003. And he's an al-Qaeda operative wandering around Pakistan and Afghanistan. He's not he doesn't have a busy schedule. He doesn't know what year it is. He doesn't know what month it is. I don't even know, to be completely candid, I don't even know if in Saudi Arabia, they would say, April 25th, or if they would use some other month or system to judge it. I know all sorts of different religions have all sorts of different calendars. So in any case, they have to first of all, they have to figure out, okay, he says he killed Americans. Where? Who? And they try to get as many details out of him as possible during this early period in 2011 when he is cooperating. He soon clams up and stops cooperating at all. But luckily enough for the Americans, they get him to talk about when and where this happened, his journey of jihad, as he calls it. And I'll give you one detail that is one of the most fun, frustrating details, which is he's talking about, they're Shreve and Bittkower are trying to, in this Italian courtroom, are trying to get him to say, when was it? They're trying to figure out some sort of time so that they can figure out which ambush it was, so they can actually figure out, okay, which Americans did he kill? And it's a very slow process because Spin Ghoul only speaks either Hausa, which is a Western African language, or Arabic. the judge only speaks Italian, and the Americans only speak English, of course. So things have to be translated multiple times. It's a very arduous process. But at one point, Spin Ghoul says something along the lines of, this was right around the time of, and the translator is helping to translate everything he says in Hausa. This is right around the times of the visit of Ramses V. And Shreve and Bitcower, the assistant U.S. attorneys, are like, oh no, he's crazy. He thinks that the Egyptian pharaohs are still in power. And he's absolutely nuts. What are we going to do about this? But then they proceed and they keep talking to him about other stuff, as many details as possible. Then they come back to it. Ramses V comes up again. And Shreve's like, okay, let me dive in a little bit there. Ramses V and the interpreter goes back and forth with Spin Ghoul on this item of Ramses V. And then he's like, oh, no, he's not saying Ramses. He's saying Rumsfeld. And it's not Ramses V. He's holding up 5 to symbolize the 5 sides of the Pentagon. So he's talking about a time that Rumsfeld was about to come to Afghanistan. And the Americans are like, oh, thank God. Because so many other details he was sharing were completely accurate in terms of the names of terrorists that nobody would know unless you were deep into the world of terrorism. And Shreve and Bitcower knew those names because they had worked on Obama's Gitmo task force. So they knew a bunch of the people that were in Gitmo, but they're not names that you or I or most of your listeners or viewers would have any idea. A guy named Hadi, a guy named Faraj. If you're in the counterterrorism biz, you would know them, but most people don't know them. Anyway, they proceed, but it's like that it's that kind of painstaking process to find as many details as they can to get an idea. So they figure out about the time of the ambush. They figure out which one it might have been, and he said enough geographical details, so they figure it out. Now they have to go track down from all the people who were ambushed. And Spin Ghoul thought that 5 or 6 had been killed, only 2 had been killed, but about 4 others had been seriously wounded. So it made sense, but they start piecing it together. Then they start to have to look for physical evidence. Then they start to look for witnesses. And remember, in 2011, so much of the evidence has been tainted by torture. So many, and this is one of the big challenges for Obama's Guantanamo task force, is that so many courts just will not use evidence that has been obtained by the CIA under enhanced interrogation. And in fact, right during this period, there is a case against a guy named Galani, and the jury, because the judge throws out evidence as tainted, the jury almost lets him free. They acquit him of I think it's 284 out of 285 charges. It had to do with the 1998 embassy bombings. And they acquit him on almost everything. And that sends a shock through the entire political and counterterrorism community, because they're like, oh my God, this guy was almost walking the streets of New York. He was almost set free. So that makes the journey of finding evidence all the more important. But the cast of characters is incredible. There's this incredible character named Nicole Bagley, who was a fingerprint analyst at Quantico, and she's challenged to find evidence of Spin Ghoul's presence in that Afghanistan battlefield based on all the items that are it's called pocket litter, stuff that's found on the bodies of there was one dead body, one dead insurgent. Anyway, it was so much fun to report, because every time, when Bitcower told me the story, I first heard the story because Bitcower's son is friends with my son. And I just met him at my son's birthday party, and he was just telling me this incredible story. And, sometimes somebody starts telling you an incredible story and wow, that's a great story. And then I was like, wait a second, has anybody written the story? Because this is such a great story. And nobody had, but I ended up being able to find out more stuff about it than he did, because, he only knew his piece of the elephant, and I got to report on the whole elephant.
Well, and that's wild. And you really set up why it was so important to sort of put these different pieces together, especially given the moment that we were in. I mean, when you were like Ramses, by the way, I have a dog named Ramses.
Do you really?
Yeah, I have
That's funny.
Yeah, he actually is named after the pharaoh. So, right. So if you are an investigator, you're going to think that this dude is nuts. I'm not going to ask that you give away the ending, because everybody should read the book, Race Against Terror, out on October 7th. But I wonder if you think that this is also a story about interagency cooperation. So pre 9/11, there was a story of the failures of agencies to cooperate and share information. How much of your story and the drama that these two prosecutors had to endure, how much of it was sort of mitigated by the fact that we were then in a moment where agencies were very aware of the need that they had to work together?
It was actually a very exemplary moment of cooperation with intelligence agencies and the FBI and the Justice Department, everybody working together really well. And look, I mean, this was at the time, and still to this day, Spin Ghoul is the only foreign terrorist who has ever been tried in a criminal court in the United States for killing soldiers on a battlefield. It just doesn't happen very often. Usually when Americans are killed on a battlefield during a battle or an ambush, I mean, nobody's expecting, okay, and then we're going to take these Taliban or al-Qaeda villains and bring them to Brooklyn and prosecute them. It just doesn't happen. But it was this remarkable case. Right now, the Trump administration is attempting to do the same thing with a guy named Jafar, who was one of the people who planned the Abbey Gate bombing at the end of the Afghanistan war in 2021. So there is this model and template that I don't even know if the Trump team is aware of, but like back in 2011, it was considered like crazy and, you know, and liberal and Obama and weak and all this stuff. But now, you know, the war on terror has evolved and the cooperation between the agencies, among the agencies, has improved so much that they're able to do it. And we'll see what happens with Jafar. But yeah, no, there's a whole section about SIPA, which I'm sure you know what that is. But SIPA has to do with basically it's how do you introduce intelligence that is necessary to prosecute a terrorist, but you can't just treat it normally like you would in a normal criminal case. Like you're not going to bring the CIA agent or the double agent or whatever into the courtroom and have the defense cross-examine them. And it used to be, until the SIPA law was passed in the end of the Carter years in the late 70s, it used to be that this is how bad guys got away with leaking or with other stuff, is because the U.S. would not want to let the intelligence into a criminal court. They didn't want to expose sources and methods. So now there is a method for that. It's a closed hearing just on this stuff where basically, and the jury's not even there, where basically the judge hears everything. It's not released to the public, and it is, here is what we got, here is how we got it. The defendant's not even there, although the defense attorneys are, and they just like come to an agreement about what they can use or what they can't use. So the prosecutions have proceeded quite a bit since the early days of the so-called war on terror.
And you said that the Trump administration is currently employing this model of rules and due process in an open court with respect to the prosecution of
Jafar,
a terrorist. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much they're even aware of it. Spin Ghoul was, even though it was an Obama era case, Spin Ghoul was, when the court case actually happened in 2017, well, I'll just say that because I don't want to spoil anything. But when the court case happened in 2017, Trump was president. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, was not happy about it because he did not want terrorists to be tried in a criminal court. But at that point, the case had been going for so long, and it happened. But there wasn't another one until just recently. Trump announced it at his address to Congress, I guess, in March or April.
So shifting gears a little bit, but staying on the topic of the Trump administration, you recently described the president's lawsuit against 60 Minutes as, and I'm quoting you, bullshit. You said it was bullshit.
It was.
Why? Tell us why you think it was bullshit.
So his lawsuit against 60 Minutes is for edits that they did to an interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris in October 2024. And basically what happened was the 60 Minutes correspondent, Bill Whitaker, interviewed her. It was like a 45-minute interview. And this is the way 60 Minutes does it. This is not how I do it on CNN, but they take a 45-minute interview, and instead of airing the whole thing, they cut it and slice it and this and that, and they make it a 7-minute segment. I don't know. That seems kind of anachronistic to me, but whatever. That's what they did. And she gave a very long word salady answer when it came to Israel's war in Gaza. And they used a little bit of it when they promoted the show on Sunday on Face the Nation, and they used a different part of it when they aired the actual story. And Trump is claiming that this was bias, that they were, he's claimed a whole bunch of stuff. He said that they took parts from a different answer to a different question, and that's not true. In any case, these kinds of editorial judgments are made all the time. I personally, look, I'm on cable, so it's different. I have more time than most people do. And I'm not a huge fan of editing interviews. I'd rather do a live interview. And if I do an interview that I have to edit, I'd rather have it be as little editing as possible. But there's nothing criminal about it. And there's nothing defamatory about it. They had offered an interview to Trump and he rejected it. The whole case was nonsense. And there's actually, although Fox is not governed by the Federal Communications Commission because cable is not the same as network, there was a time that Trump was interviewed about before he became president, would he release these files? Would he release those files? And Fox aired a clip that made him seem super decisive. Will you release the Epstein files? Yes, I will. But then they later on the podcast version ran the whole thing, and it was longer and more mealy mouthed. And then he kind of walked it back. And that is an example of editing to shade an answer. And if you're going to make the argument that that's what the 60 Minutes people did, which I don't really think is what they did, it's still not bias. It's the actions of an editor trying to make a long interview fit into a short amount of time. And news organizations, as long as they're operating reasonably within the lines, I think get to do that. I don't think there's any question that this would not have succeeded in court. The point was that the family that owned the controlling share of Paramount was in the middle of this merger with Skydance, and Trump, they wanted to basically, it was, I'll tell you what 60 Minutes people told me off the record, or CBS News people, which was not off the record, but on background, which was, this is a bribe. This is payoff. Because they want
the $16 million settlement that you're talking about that Paramount paid to resolve.
And there's probably more, because Trump referred to Skydance as having agreed to a whole bunch of other stuff having to do with public service announcements and this and that. So,
but I interrupted you. Go back to what people were telling you on background.
Just that it was a payoff. That it was Sherry Redstone, who was trying to get this merger through so she could, collect her money. And look, don't get me wrong. The bad behavior is by Trump, weaponizing the government, but she went along with it. And, and a payoff was made, as it were. It's a horrible precedent. And I think that the case was laughable, just absolutely ridiculous. There have been times where President Trump has had a point when it comes to complaints about fairness in media coverage. I'm not going to say he's always been treated fairly, but this was ridiculous.
Are you worried about your ability to retain your journalistic integrity and independence in this sort of environment? Are you nervous? Are there things that you second guess before you report them or come on air that maybe you wouldn't have before?
No, because I have adhered to the set of standards that I think are important, and that hasn't changed. And no, I'm not worried about my ability to maintain my integrity, because if it came down to it, I am fortunate enough that I could
quit.
Yeah. And write books and maybe do a podcast or whatever. But I do, it's not a personal fear, but it is chilling to see how much the government is being weaponized. And look, if one thinks, and I could understand the argument, I'm not going to take a position on it, but I could understand the argument of somebody saying that Alvin Bragg's case against Donald Trump when it came to the hush money payment was was a nonsense case, because what he did was he took a misdemeanor and by claiming it was in the service of another misdemeanor created a felony, and it's kind of nonsense. And it was certainly a creative use of law at the very least. I could understand that argument. And I never think it's a good look for anybody to run for a prosecutor's role, whether it's Alvin Bragg or Letitia James or anyone, saying, I'm going to go after so-and-so. I just think that that's a bad precedent. But that said, the response to, if you think that government has been weaponized against you, the correct response is to end it, not to then do it worse and more, more vociferously. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing in this Trump era is the solution to unfair media more unfair media, like worse? That's what I see going on. And I just think that that's unhealthy. I don't like seeing media organizations bow and prostrate themselves before any president. And I think that that's what happened with 60 Minutes.
Well, certainly something else that we're seeing in media organizations is a balkanization of the sort that we probably haven't had since Civil War times. I mean, everybody's got it. It really is. I mean, honestly, you, Jake Tapper, could be standing outside. You could be looking at a meteor plunging into the earth and saying, hey, everybody, breaking news. There's a meteor headed to Earth. And a whole bunch of people would be like, that's fake news, fake CNN, fake news, fake Jake Tapper. He's just trying to get us all worked out.
But I would get it, me personally, I would get it from the right and the left.
You sure would, and we're going to come to that in a second.
But yeah, no, it's awful. And let me just say on this subject, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I see it in my family. There are people in my family who, extended, not my wife and daughter and son, but extended family, cousins, etc. There are people in my family who don't think I should be interviewing Republicans. There are people in my family who believe everything that the right-wing ecosphere tells them about everything. I see it. I see how this is. It's much worse now than it was 10 years ago. And I see how toxic it is. And it makes it so it increases the demonization of people. You talk about balkanization, which is such a great word because it makes me think about the war in former Yugoslavia. It makes me think about the Serbs and the Croats. And it makes me think about people going to war. And the easiest thing to do, the first thing you want to do if you want to encourage people in war, I'm not talking about America right now, but in actual war, World War II, Vietnam, whatever, the way you propagandize to get your soldiers to kill the other side is you make them believe that the other side is not human. They're not people.
That's right.
They're not real. They're evil demons. They're monsters. And I see liberals doing that to conservatives, and I see conservatives doing that to liberals. And I think it is. I'm not saying that the two sides are equal or this or that, but I am just saying it is very unhealthy.
How do you get the pendulum to swing back?
I don't know. All I can do is just try to report the news, be as fair as possible, have Democrats on my show, have Republicans on my show. I'm very proud of the fact that I have one of the few shows on television where in the same show we had Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, and the current House Speaker, Mike Johnson. We had them both on my show. The tone of the interviews was I think fairly similar, and they were substantive interviews. And all I can do is try to do the best job I can, calling balls and strikes and being fair. But I can't swing the pendulum. I can't do it alone. That's for sure.
Speaking of heat that you've taken from both sides.
Here we go.
I had your co-author on Original Sin on, Alex Thompson.
I love Alex.
He was great. He was a great guest. I had fun. It was a fun conversation. And I remember when that book came out, I remember watching you on C-SPAN, and there was a caller on the phone, sounded like an older woman.
Yeah.
She excoriated you. I mean, she read you, The Riot, my friend, and you.
I don't like you. I don't like you.
She was like, I used to like you. I hate you. You shouldn't be on. She went for it.
Yeah.
And I was actually looking at the clip with a friend, and we were like, he's, you kept good face. You gave good face with it. There was that moment. Today, this morning, the New York Times just reported on former Vice President Harris's new book, where she describes democratic deference to Biden and his decision to run as reckless. And other Democratic leaders have said, it shouldn't have happened. Do you feel vindicated? I mean, you took a lot of heat. You and Alex both took a lot of heat for that reporting and for taking, people were mad at you on the regular. How do you feel now?
I mean, I felt vindicated then. It's nice to see other people. Basically, I've only read the one excerpt of the Vice President Harris book, which I haven't read the whole book. I read the one excerpt, which is in The Atlantic. And it basically conforms with everything that Alex and I reported, which was she was very loyal, perhaps to a fault, to Biden. She felt like they didn't treat her very well, that the decision was reckless. Now, the one quibble I might have is she basically says that there was no cognitive decline. It was just he was old, and because he was old, he would get tired, he would make mistakes. But, we talked to a lot of people who describe much worse than just tired and making mistakes. But you know what? We all saw the debate. We can all make a judgment for ourselves about whether or not that's a normal tired person or if something else is going on. But I'd be lying if I didn't say, like, I'm glad that what she wrote in her book is pretty much what we wrote in ours. Of course, I feel that way. I think the book is going to age very well. I think the book is going to...
Your book, you mean, Original Sin?
Mine, yeah. I don't know about hers. What I read today was very interesting. I'm not being critical of it. I have to read her whole book before I make a judgment on it. But what I read today was interesting and a lot more candid than I thought it would be. No offense to her, just politicians in general are not the most candid authors until they retire. And I think it's pretty clear Vice President Harris is not retired. She's only 60, I think. She's got a lot of years ahead of her. But in any case, I think the book holds up. And we were very deliberate and careful in our reporting. If there was something that was one source and we weren't 100% on it, we didn't include it. There was just, the stakes were just too high and we wanted everything to be airtight.
You interview, as you point out, everybody on all sides on your show. And I'll put you on the spot a little bit. I won't ask you who your favorite is, like who the most enjoyable person to talk to is, because often you're talking about things that are traumatic and disturbing to a lot of us. But who are some of your favorite truth tellers? Like, who are the folks who, when they sit down and the seat opposite you, they're just not going to bullshit you?
Wow, that's a tough question, because most politicians, most humans engage in at least a little bit of bullshit. We all are the heroes of our own narratives. The question about who was most fun to interview is the easiest question. I'll just tell you anyway, which is Larry David. I got to interview him.
Oh, he'd be great. I bet that'd be great.
15 or 20 years ago, and before Curb Your Enthusiasm, I think. Anyway, it was so much fun.
Who's a politician? Is there a policymaker who you think is less inclined to BS you than might be the case in the normal course? Like, if you want a real answer, like some people, what they're going to say. Oh, it's a lie. It's a lie from the other side. Democrats made this up. Blah, 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 blah. It's about fealty to Trump. Blah, 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 blah. But who is there someone who, and maybe it's too hard to come up with someone, which I think is sad in and of itself. But is there somebody who you can sort of rely on to at least be a steady voice of reason and veracity? I
mean, I think that David Axelrod on the left, former Obama advisor, is a pretty. I mean, he's not elected, but he calls them as he sees them. I think on the right, Adam Kinzinger, former Republican congressman from Illinois, he tries to call them as he sees them. It's very difficult to come up with names of people that are current office holders because it's tough being a politician. I will say there is a congresswoman from Washington State that not a lot of people have heard of, Maria Gluesenkamp Perez, or is it Marie Gluesenkamp Perez? She has a very difficult district, and she seems very authentic and honest about things. Like, she tried to push a motion. She's in the House Appropriations Committee, and you might remember the chair of the House Appropriations Committee just last year, a Republican named Kay Granger, stepped down as chair and then immediately and secretly checked herself in, or the family checked her into dementia care in Texas. Mm. And she just drew a check for 6 months and nobody said anything. and the district I think out in the Dallas area just didn't have a member of Congress. So Gluesenkamp-Perez offered an amendment to try to say we should have a protocol here in Congress so that people can report to the House Ethics Committee if they think that members of Congress are, cognitively declining. I mean, there are more people 70, 75 and older in Congress now than there have ever been. My current representation, I live in D.C., a legend, but Eleanor Holmes Norton is 88 years old. She's not allowed to drive anymore. She can barely walk. I mean, I think there are serious questions about whether she should be running for re-election, but she is. So anyway, she tried to just a very basic amendment on we should just have a process. So if you're concerned about somebody, there's a way to report it. Then she got, no support for it. And it didn't even come to a vote in the Appropriations Committee. I find her fairly authentic as these things go. And there's a congressman, a Democrat, Jared Golden from Maine, who's pretty honest. There's a guy named Don Bacon, a Republican from Omaha. He's retiring. I find him refreshing in his willingness to say things that might challenge President Trump, but it's not a lot of people. And I have, and I do great on a curve. I'll admit.
You talked a little bit about weaponizing governmental institutions. What do you think about what's happening at West Point right now? They just revoked an award from Tom Hanks, which the president celebrated as a testament to non-wokeness.
But this is again what I'm talking about. If you think that our institutions are too deferential to liberals or too woke, the answer isn't pull an award for Tom Hanks. The answer is just okay, let's get some more conservatives in there. It's not. First of all, I don't understand it because Tom Hanks, yes, he's obviously a Democrat. Yes, he obviously supported Harris and Biden, et cetera. But he's incredibly active in the veterans community. He helped raise money for the World War II Memorial. He does stuff for wounded veterans. He has been a force in some of the most important depictions of military in American pop culture, whether it's Band of Brothers, which he, I think, executive produced, or his role in Saving Private Ryan. I mean, the guy's a legend in the veterans world for his work, not for his political views, for his work. And it's just really disappointing to see this. And also, if you listed 100 woke celebrities, would Tom Hanks be on that list? I mean, he wouldn't be on mine.
I'm confused about what woke means now these days. I mean,
I know what it used to mean.
I think that maybe it used to mean. I don't even want to offer.
I think it means anything against Trump. That's
what it means now. I mean, I think that's what it means now.
It used to be awakening to the historical injustices in this country. Right? Then you all of a sudden you're woke. It's from the Black community, and now it's been co-opted by the opponents of it. Yeah,
to sort of suggest that any awareness of anything that either harmed or disadvantaged folks who aren't white and aren't white men or aren't white Christian men is somehow a bad thing. We use these terms, and I think it's sometimes hard. We're not even talking about the same thing. I don't want to keep you too long, and thank you for being so patient. But because I really could talk to you forever, and I won't. But if you could correct the record, and when I say the record, not your record, not something that someone's accused you of done. Of having said or done. But if you could correct the record on an important fact that's a part of our current political discourse, if you could correct the record on one thing, what would it be?
Oh, wow. I guess just because I'm in the throes of covering it, the idea that the media is covering the Epstein list or the Epstein files or Epstein's victims or whatever, the idea that everybody who's covering it is doing it, this is a White House argument, is doing it just to attack President Trump or even motivated in any way having to do with President Trump. I can only speak for me and my staff on my show, but honestly, remove Trump from it entirely. I have seen no evidence that Donald Trump did anything illegal associated with Jeffrey Epstein. I think this is a huge scandal because for decades, this guy, this very wealthy man in Florida was getting away with grooming children and raping them, and perhaps even was providing them as sexual candy to give to his wealthy friends. There has been very little justice for these women, former girls, and I am 100% motivated by the fact that I think there should be justice in this case. I don't understand what the White House is doing in terms of why they're handling this case the way they're handling it, but it's almost irrelevant to my motivations. I don't know if that is what you're looking for, but that is something that I hear from Republicans or from the White House, and it's just not true at all. Like, honestly, if in exchange for releasing all the files, President Trump said, "I'll release all the files, but don't mention my name associated with this case," I'd be like, sure. I mean, like, I want to see what's in the files. I want these girls to get justice, these women to get justice. They were girls, because a lot of people got away with a lot of bad stuff. And it's just Epstein and Maxwell, who's now in a minimum security prison for whatever reason. It's a bunch of other very wealthy, very powerful men, well-connected men. And at the very least, they should be exposed, if not criminally charged. So I guess, I probably don't have to convince you of that anyways. That is something that is an accusation that I find really, although not aimed at me in particular, I find really bothersome, because it's like, that's just so not true. And in fact, conservatives a year ago, MAGA a year ago, or even 6 months ago, were making the same argument and saying they were going to release all the files.
It's a crime on a crime that the story of what happened to those girls, and yes, they may be women now, but horrible, shocking things happen to these girls.
Yeah.
And they've absolutely been lost in the narrative. They've been lost in the narrative, and their stories should be told. And something needs to happen. I mean, you can't just rape children and then go on about your business. Jake Tapper.
Can I just say one thing before you sign me off? Which is, I agree with you 100%. In our coverage, we have tried to be platforming of the victims, of the survivors, as much as possible, having them tell their stories. Because one of the things that a lot of people don't know, and I know you do, but is the idea of trafficking is it's complicated. It's not 20 girls living in a dungeon and being dragged out, when Epstein had a party. It's a much more complicated psychological thing where these girls are groomed, they're vulnerable, they're often drug addicts, they're often runaways. They are given a lifeline, they are given money, they're given housing, they're given food, and they come to depend on this, and they are pressured and raped into acts. And it is something that I think we haven't talked about enough as a society because it's so awful. But like, there is a complicated, I'm not saying it's nuanced, but there's just a lack of understanding of what it is that I think we need to talk about more. And that's what I try to do when we platform the survivors.
Well, and I think the grooming is something that people really should talk a little bit more about. And thank you for bringing that up, because, we live in a culture now where we've got all of these young children, young women staring at images on social, wanting to be told that they're beautiful, wanting to be told that they're going to get famous and have their moment. I mean, that is a real thing now for girls who are really, really young. And I don't think it existed in the same way when I was a kid. So when you think about the susceptibility of these children to that sort of attention, it really is incredibly disturbing. Let's leave on a positive note. What's something that makes you optimistic these days?
The kids of America. I have an 18-year-old daughter who's a freshman in college, and I have a almost 16-year-old son who's in 10th grade. Their friends. I think they're sophisticated. I think they're smart. I think they're good people. I see so much less racial, even awareness. Do you know what I mean? Like, even awareness of you're black, I'm white. Like, it just seems to, I'm not saying it's not there. I don't want to be naive about it, but it just seems to not be as much of a factor as it was when I was young, which I think is great. Also with LGBT kids as well, just more acceptance of this is who people are and we accept them for who they are. They give me a lot of hope. This generation, whatever they're called. I don't know if they're Gen Z.
Go Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen whatever you are. I can't catch up. That is actually a wonderful way to end this conversation. Jake Tapper. Wow, I had a great time. I hope
this was so much fun. Yeah.
I can't wait to have you back. I know you got some big news to cover, so have at it.
I'll be back anytime you want. Just make the request and I'll be here.
I certainly will. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you so much.